When I was in law school, I decided I needed to ask my father about my mother. I had been having nightmares and panic attacks. I could no longer attend my classes at law school. So I returned to New Jersey and set out one day to have lunch with my father at his office, the one place where he might open up. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What? Tell me. I'm listening." "I've been seeing a counselor at the university. I've had such a hard time this past January. Everything seemed to catch up with me." Silence. I plunged ahead. "We've acted as if nothing bad happened to us, or as if everything that's gone wrong didn't affect us. But it did, and I need to figure out how it did." He turned away from me, looking out the window in front of the sink. "Dad, I need to know what happened to her, to my mother." "Dad, can you tell me, please?" Tears ran down his face, tears falling onto his beautifully pressed light blue Brooks Brothers shirt. "I can't talk about it. Not yet," he said in a voice so soft I leaned over to hear him. "Maybe someday." I wrapped my arms around him, my own tears spotting his shirt. Within 2 seconds, he pulled away. "We can't cry. We have to be strong. We can't stop now after all this time." My father was amazingly powerful in his silence, in mandating a strict code of silence. I think, looking back on it, that I was terrified that if I broke that mandate, that I'd lose him. So a cousin once brought her up to me. I have a cousin who's 8 years older. So she actually knew my mother before she became pretty ill. And I remember her showing me a photograph, so I must have been maybe 10. And it just scared the daylights out of me because I really felt like the woman was a ghost, and so to see an actual photograph of her. But I didn't even dare tell my father that I had seen that photograph. I felt like I just had to act like she had never existed. This portion is from an interview with Edgar Edelsack, who lives in Washington, D.C., and was among the liberators of Mauthausen, which was a slave labor camp. "Here I was, 21, Mr. Edelsack said, having seen colleagues blown up as they tried to de-arm German mines, being put on a detail to load bodies of frozen GIs onto trucks. So I was a very hardened soldier. But to see Mauthausen was something very, very emotionally, something that to this day I have not made peace with." His voice broke, and he looked down at his hands pressed together on the table. I wanted to reach out, take a hand, and whisper reassurance that he wasn't alone. War presumes the possibility of defense and even-handed combat, but in the camps even children were brutalized. Every moral code proved meaningless. What I saw there in those photographs mirrors what we see in pictures of the Holocaust, emaciated people of just bone and skin. Mr. Edelsack's voice broke again. "I provided food, K-rations, cigarettes, and took many photographs over the 2 days I was there." He stopped, looking down again at his hands. "Very difficult. I had to give the pictures away. They were so emotionally disturbing that after many years I couldn't face looking at them. The whole subject is one I have subjugated, that I haven't talked very much about to Charlotte or my family, because it's one that always brings up tears. The next portion are the words of Eli Heimberg, who was a liberator also of Dachau. He was the assistant to the rabbi of the 42nd Infantry Division. I was the assistant to Rabbi Bonin, he told me, a wonderful man. We knew to expect horrible things when we came upon Dachau, but nothing like what we found. There was no way to prepare ourselves for it. More horrifying than the ovens were the bodies in the boxcars on the track leading into the camp. One man who must have been trying to extricate himself was reaching out from among the bodies, frozen in death, as if asking, "Why me?" Most of the prisoners were so weak and close to death that they couldn't stand. They were lying on these wooden shelves, hundreds of them, side by side. Rabbi Bonin told them, "Ich bin ein Reb Amerikan." I am an American rabbi. And then there came a wail from the men as though they were letting out all their emotions they had pent up for years. He broke off, tucked his chin down into his chest, which was visibly rising with a deep breath. When the rabbi and I could speak, we assured them help was coming. The rabbi recited the memorial prayer for the dead, and then I wept without control. My one wish for all of humanity is that we could all go to school in empathy. It really troubles me how little emotional intelligence is talked about in schools, and I don't think there's anything more important to our surviving as a species than developing empathy. And going through this journey, meeting those other liberators, was critical to my developing empathy for my father, which was critical to the forgiveness and the peace. No other book had talked about the emotional repercussions for the liberators of witnessing the camps. We don't understand how atrocity affects witnesses as well as victims. And then we widen it to all combat and to all victims of combat. And we begin to realize we are all victims of combat, because I think if you go far enough back in any family, you will find a veteran who suffered terribly, and terrible dysfunction followed, which has created a legacy. I don't have the taboos anymore. The silence no longer has power over me. And I still have an inclination to go silent when things become difficult. But my husband or my children can sort of nudge me, and I'll laugh. I won't get defensive and angry about it. So that's maybe the most dramatic difference. And my relationship with depression is different. I no longer identify myself as being a depressed person. Depression, there's this wonderful poem by Rumi, the ancient Persian poet, called The Guest House, where a person is a guest house and many emotions come through. And we have to greet and honor each one, not try to keep them locked behind the door, because we don't want them to come in, because every emotion has something to teach us. And if we can be open and not feel threatened and realize that they'll just pass through and we'll learn something from them as they pass through, then we will actually have a chance of having a healthier life. And that's now how I see the depression. It's just one of many emotions. It's not who I am.